In this lesson, we will be discussing the fuzzy lookup transform. This is one of the harder transforms to understand and to get what it does, but basically what it does is it cleanses bad data. Oftentimes in a real-world environment, not like the AdventureWords database, where all of the data is perfect and we don't really have to worry about having too much bad data in it. Well, in the real world, we will have to dealing with bad data and how to handle it. What the fuzzy lookup does is it cleanses that bad data, which is any kind of string bad data. As you see, that it requires either the Unicode string or the regular string data types. So it'll take a look at that string column you have, and it'll compare it against a table that you already have. It'll use a reference table to compare that column to the new incoming data, and it'll try and correct based on some configurations that you've set. Now, the configurations can be a little bit confusing, so we'll discuss that in greater detail in the demo portion. But it's an ongoing process. So with the configurations, you'll have to make adjustments just to determine what it's going to take to correctly get that bad data cleansed. So what it'll do. Let me just repeat this one more time. What it'll do is you'll have a reference table, or let's say a geography table, for instance, and you're bringing in new columns that have a geography column in it, and you're using the country column, and you might have some of this. Some data that comes in with misspelled countries and things like that. Well, you'll use your original geography table to reference as a reference point to check and see if things are misspelled or truncated or anything like that, and that incoming data can be replaced with the reference column. And it might be a little confusing just to talk about it, so again, whenever we get into our demo portion, it'll be much easier to understand. The one big thing to keep best practice is to always use a regular lookup first. Now, the reason is because the fuzzy lookup is it's a very expensive operation to use, and it can really kill performance. And in fact, when you're running this demo, you may notice that it might take quite a while on your computer. I have a 64-bit machine, so it might happen to run very quickly for me, but if you don't, it could take quite a while. And we're actually only loading 20 rows, but it'll still take quite a while. So just keep that in mind when you're using the fuzzy lookup transform. Always use a regular lookup first. Alright, so in this lesson, what we're going to do is we're going to deal with an incoming flat file source that has some bad data in it. It has we have a reference table for occupation that has a list of occupations that are correctly inputted. And our source that we're bringing in with the flat file has some bad data of occupations that are misspelled and truncated and inverted letters and all that kind of good stuff. So that's what we're doing. Let's go ahead and start a package. We're going to create a new package called Lesson26. Go ahead and rename that. Oops, let's do that one more time here. And we do want to also rename the package object. Yes. And we're ready to begin. So what we need to do first is bring over a data flow task from our toolbox. Just drag that on over. And we're going to name this data flow task DFT fuzzy lookup. Okay. So let's go ahead and create a new connection manager, a new flat file connection manager. We've been doing this inside the source, but let's try it this way this time. So right click in the connection manager area on the bottom and say you want to create a new flat file connection. And we're going to name it new employee. So we're going to name this new employee. And then we're going to browse to the C Projects SSIS Personal Trainer folder, and then the file is going to be called fuzzy example. So take that. The first column the first row, it does have the column name, so check that. And if you'd like, you can take a look at what columns we're bringing in. We're bringing in last name, first name, and then the title of the employee. And you can tell right away that a lot of these are different. We have customer service representative, we have cust service rep, which is actually the same thing. We have shift lead, and store manager abbreviated, store manager spelled out. All of these are different. and we want them the same. So we're going to be using the fuzzy lookup to correct things that are correct the columns that are incorrect to match what we have in our reference table. Okay, so our next step is going to be to bring over a flat file source from your toolbox. Bring over the flat file source. We already created the new employee connection manager, so let's go ahead and rename the flat file source also. We're going to name it new employee load, because we're pretending that this is the file we get every day of all the new employees. And for some reason someone typed in their occupation incorrectly. Alright, so let's go ahead into our source here, and it automatically found that our flat file connection manager that we created, the new employee, which is what we want to use, so keep that. On our columns tab, we're going to change some of the column names. So we're going to have the output as occupation label for this one. And we're going to change these to not be all caps. We're just trying to match it so that this will make our mapping easier later on throughout the package. So it's the same data, it's just we've given it an alias here so that it has a different output name for the column. Alright, we have everything here okay, so let's click OK. Our next step is going to be to, inside Management Studio, create a table for the occupations. So to do that, go ahead and open Management Studio, which you will find in, I'll show you where to find it here real quickly. All Programs, Microsoft SQL Server 2008, and SQL Server Management Studio. Okay, so now we're going to create our reference table. And our reference table is going to be all detailing the occupations. So go ahead and click New Query. And I'm just going to paste this query in to create the table, the create table here. You have this, you can get it from rocks.com, or you can just copy it from the book itself. And I'm going to be executing this in AdventureWorks 2008. And go ahead and execute it. And we'll take a look at our table real quickly, just so you can have a look at what a reference table looks like. It's called Occupation. And all it is occupation ID followed by what the occupation should look like. So this reference table is going to serve as what we're going to change all of our that flat file we're bringing in. We're going to change all of the occupations to match what it says in this occupation table. And this is our reference table. Remember on there we had cust serve rep. And we were going to convert that to say customer service representative. Okay, so let's go back to our package now that we have that created. Our next step is going to be to make a connection manager going to that occupation table. So let's create a new OLEDB connection to the AdventureWorks 2008 database, which is correct. I'm going to rename this just AdventureWorks 2008. And then we're going to bring over a regular lookup. Remember in the slides I gave you the warning that you're always going to want to use a regular lookup first before you do your fuzzy lookup. If you do have any correct data, you want to bring that over first instead of having all of your rows go through the fuzzy lookup. You might have some data that's correct, which in this case we do. So let's bring over a lookup and connect that to our source. And once we have that, go ahead and double click on it there. And everything looks good here. We're going to stick with full cache mode, and we're using the OLEDB connection manager. In our connections, we're going to select the table occupation that we just used, or that we just created. Occupation. And check out the columns. We're going to be using the occupation label and bringing back the occupation ID. So we're trying to get this occupation label is what matches in both columns, and the occupation ID is going to be what we're trying to bring back as an extra column. So we'll have 4 columns: last name, first name, occupation label, and then occupation ID is also going to be a new column that we're getting from this lookup. So some of this data is not going to match. If you remember looking at the original file, the occupation label is going to have, misspelled data, which is why we're about to do the fuzzy lookup. One more step here. What we want to do in the general is if it finds non-matching rows, we don't want to fail it. We want to redirect the rows to a non-matching output. Because we already know that we're going to have some rows that aren't going to match because we're basing our join here on occupation label. And then when we looked at it, like we said, we had misspellings. So we're going to redirect those rows to another direction, which is going to be our fuzzy lookup. Alright, we have everything here, so go ahead and click OK. Let's drag over a fuzzy lookup transform. And we're going to connect the non-matching rows, the no-match rows. If they match already, if the data is correct, then we just want to send it on to the destination. Otherwise, we want to use this fuzzy lookup to correct it. Okay, so now that we have that, go ahead and double-click to open your fuzzy lookup transform. And we're going to use that occupation table as our reference table. Remember, this is the table that has the correct data that we created. And then go on to the Columns tab. On the Columns tab, we already have the occupation label joined. And we also, what we want to do is return the occupation ID, just like we did in the regular lookup. Everything here on this particular tab looks the same. We are letting these columns pass through. We have these checked to pass through. And then we're joining to the occupation label, returning the occupation ID. One different thing though is we want to uncheck this one. We don't want to pass through the occupation label from the original file because remember this is one that has misspellings and truncation and all that good stuff. We want to bring back the occupation label from the reference table. Reference table has the correct spelling and the correct occupation ID. So we want to uncheck the occupation label here and check it on the reference table. Alright, the last step is going to be on the Advanced tab. One last thing here. Let me change the... but we can leave it like that, because that's how it's going to show up as default on your screen. So the output alias we're going to have with the 1 in parentheses, just know that that's because it's a new occupation label here. So we'll know that that's the one we do want to take here. Alright, so to the Advanced tab, we're going to leave most of these options to default, but we're going to take off some of these token delimiters. In fact, we're going to take all of them off. Token delimiters is basically what it should look for in the columns. We know we had some abbreviations, so I'm going to leave the period here in the additional delimiter, but this is basically what it's looking for, so it knows that these are add-on characters we have in there. So go ahead and leave everything else as default except for the token delimiters. Uncheck those and add a period to the additional delimiters. Alright, so we are complete with the fuzzy lookup transform. Just remember what we're doing. We're returning these columns, the occupation ID and the occupation label, and we're using that from the reference table called occupation. Alright, so click OK. Next step is going to be a union all, because we're going to join this data together so that we can send it into a single destination. So I go ahead and bring over a union all. And remember how the union all works. It's not much configuration other than connecting it. So these are the matched rows. Remember we use the regular lookup first so that if there are any rows that are correct in our flat file, we don't want those to have to go through the fuzzy lookup because it's a very expensive operation. So we're sending these to the lookup first. If they're correct, then it's going to go ahead and go through. If it's not correct, we're sending it to the fuzzy lookup, and then we're going to join it back to the with the union all here. So let's just make sure we have everything correct in our union all. Looks like we don't. Remember that it had our occupation label from our fuzzy lookup had that 1 in the parentheses because that was showing us that we had a duplicate row. We're just going to go ahead and select it here. It's the occupation label that this is what has gone through that fuzzy lookup. So this should be the corrected occupation label. Take a look at that. These two columns are these two outputs from the regular lookup here, and the union all input 1, and the fuzzy lookup and the union all 2 here are going to join together to go into one destination here. Alright, so the union all is good. Remember, that's one of the simplest ones to configure. Let's go ahead and click OK there. Now we're going to use an OLEDB destination. So go ahead and drag over an OLEDB destination from your toolbox. And connect that to your union all. Once you have that connected, go ahead and double click on your destination. And we're going to create a new table to load to. This is going to be a new table that we're creating called Employee Roster. Let's go ahead and click New. And you can get this text I'm about to copy and paste in here from rocks.com, but you'll also see it in the book. So we're creating a table that has the employee ID, last name, first name, occupation ID, and then the label. And you'll also see the employee ID is an identity column, so it's going to automatically generate a number for that each time. Alright, so click OK. We have the script for creating our table here correct. And then let's check out our mappings page. Because we created that new table, we need to ensure that our mappings is correct. Remember, the employee ID is the identity column, so that doesn't need to be mapped to anything. Occupation label is mapped to occupation label, occupation ID to ID, and the names look correct also. So this looks good. Let's go ahead and click OK. Let's take one last quick look at the data we're bringing in so that you can see the difference with the occupation label to start off with and what it's going to end up. Remember, you'll see all these abbreviations, not necessarily misspellings, but there's a bunch of abbreviations for customer representative, store manager, all that good stuff. In our reference table, we don't have any abbreviations. They're spelled out like this: regional manager. Everything's spelled out correctly. So our our lookup is going to find what matches and go ahead and send it on to the union all. What it doesn't match, it's going to send to the fuzzy lookup, and then the fuzzy lookup is going to use that reference table to correctly change our data to the correct data that we're looking for. A lot of the stuff that if it doesn't work, or it's slow, or it takes, it doesn't exactly do what you want, a lot of this stuff can be adjusted in the advanced editor here with the similarity threshold. So you might have to adjust the similarity threshold to get the desired results that you want. But for this example, the 0.00 should work. So let's go ahead and execute our package. From our Solution Explorer, we'll right click and say Execute Package. And remember, I said this fuzzy lookup is an expensive transform, so it could take a little bit for you. I'm running on a 64-bit machine, so you'll see it went pretty fast there. So it went ahead and loaded our destination. I'm going to stop it, and we'll take a look at our employee roster table that we created. So let me refresh our table list here. Now I have the employee rosters. Let's take a look at it. Remember what the original file looked like. Let me show you the original file. It was under C, Projects, Fuzzy Example. This was our original file here, with all the abbreviations. So let's look for Harry Henderson. Harry Henderson. Our customer service rep got changed to customer service representative. So our fuzzy lookup correctly determined that this was what we were trying to use. We were trying to actually use customer service representative instead of this abbreviated customer service rep, and it replaced it with the correct label. It also gave us the correct occupation ID. Remember that reference table, the occupation table right here had occupation IDs, which it brought back and inserted into this table. So that's how you use the fuzzy lookup transform. Let's go ahead and review what we just spoke about here. So in this lesson we learned how to configure the fuzzy lookup transform. The fuzzy lookup transform was used to cleanse bad data that we have in some of the sources. In the example we had a list of employees and the title that they held, and we used a reference table for occupation to correctly change that misspelled or inappropriately listed data to the correct listed data that we had from our reference table. It can only be used with a string data type, so it can't be used with an integer or anything like that, we did return an integer with our lookup to return the occupation ID that we had in our reference table. You can do that. So it's used to correct abnormalities with your data, like misspellings or truncation, and you're going to use that reference table always to reference to and clean your data with. Anytime you use the fuzzy lookup transform, make sure that you have a regular lookup just before it in case your data is correct. Like I said, the fuzzy lookup transform is a very expensive operation to use, so you always want to try and use a regular lookup first to bring any of your data that's correct straight through. If it's not correct, then go ahead and send it to the fuzzy lookup, which that's where we set in our original regular lookup. We said if there's no matching rows, then go to the fuzzy lookup. If it matches, go ahead and pass.